11 alien predators came to Earth carrying a weapon that had terrified civilizations for 6,000 years. 20 minutes later, they stood frozen in silence as a human woman calmly walked away with her basket of mushrooms. The Dominion has been cataloging prey civilizations for approximately 6,000 years. This is not bragging. This is just scheduling. Every few centuries, the fleet sweeps through a new quadrant, identifies species that look like they might be worth the energy, and runs them through what we call the threat assessment spiral. The spiral has 8 levels. Most species do not get past level 3. You want to know what level Earth was flagged at during preliminary scans? Level 1. Level 1. That is the level we assign to creatures that are technically sentient but have not yet figured out how to leave their own atmosphere without strapping themselves to controlled explosions. Earth had just barely started doing that. They had sent a few small robots to their neighboring planets, which, honestly, we found adorable in the same way you find a very young hatchling trying to carry something twice its size. Precious, harmless. The biological scan came back showing no significant natural weaponry, no venom, no natural armor, no echolocation, no enhanced regeneration, soft-skinned, bipedal, medium-sized, with an average lifespan that, compared to ours, was basically a long lunch break. They had divided themselves into hundreds of squabbling subgroups, were actively arguing about the temperature of their own atmosphere, and had, at last count, made television shows about people competing to cook food against a clock. High Command took one look at the scan and said, "Light work." They assigned me. Me? Vreth Kalos of the 7th Fleet, Senior Scout, 47 successful first contact catalogings, winner of the Dominion Efficiency Medal 3 years running. They gave me Earth like it was a gift, like it was a vacation. "Take Scorn and Beluth," said Commander Dravseth, not even looking up from his tactical display. "It'll be a warm-up before the Calorian campaign." I took Scorn and Beluth. This was the last decision I made that felt entirely correct. We entered Earth's atmosphere at approximately the 22nd hour of their planetary rotation, on the side facing away from their largest population centers. Standard approach. Low light. Minimal disruption. The scan had flagged a large forested region in the northern continent, dense enough to muffle our landing, sparse enough in local population that witnesses would be minimal. The forest itself was unremarkable, dark, damp, full of those small flying organisms that produce noise without purpose. Their insect population, I believe, though at the time I was not thinking about their insect population at all. I was thinking about how quickly I could complete this and get back to real work. Scorn was running pheromone checks. Beluth was reviewing the Fear Dispersal Unit, a biological weapon we had developed approximately 900 years ago specifically for first contact situations. The fear pheromone, and I explain this because it is relevant to what happens next, extremely relevant, is not a subtle tool. It is, in technical terms, a concentrated atmospheric delivery of neurochemical panic triggers calibrated to affect almost every known sentient biological system. The effect is immediate. The effect is total. The effect in the 412 first contact situations in which it had been deployed over 9 centuries of Dominion history had never, not once, failed to produce the desired response. The desired response being, of course, that the target creature becomes so overwhelmed with biological terror that rational thought collapses and we can proceed with cataloging without any meaningful resistance. We landed in a small clearing, 60 meters from a narrow path that the scan had identified as a regularly used human transit route. We waited. We did not have to wait long. She came around the bend at a pace that, for a human, I later learned was described as leisurely. A single human female, tall, by their standards, dark-skinned, broad-shouldered, dressed in layered garments suitable for forest terrain, with a large carrying pack on her back and a metal cylinder in one hand that she appeared to be drinking from at intervals. Her name, which I did not know at the time and would not learn for another 40 minutes, was Petra Okafor. She was whistling, not out of nerves, not a nervous sound at all, just whistling, like a creature entirely at ease in a dark forest at night, alone, on a planet that had not yet made contact with a single other form of intelligent life. We stepped out of the tree line. Beluth activated the fear dispersal unit. Petra Okafor stopped walking. She looked at us, all three of us. 12 feet of Dominion Hunter armor. Bioluminescent warning patterns active. Full pheromone dispersal running at 70% saturation. Enough chemical terror in the air to drop a medium-sized herd animal into paralysis. Inside of 4 seconds. She looked at us for about 3 full seconds. Then she sniffed. Then she sneezed. Then she looked at us again and said, very calmly, in a voice that contained absolutely zero tremor, "Huh, you smell like lunch." Back on the ship, I later learned, the crew had been watching on the external feed. 7 scouts, a navigation officer, and our ship's biologist, a creature named Foss Ullin, who had catalogued 40 species, and had personally witnessed 2 full planetary surrenders. They all went completely silent. Scorn, standing to my left, made a sound I had never heard him make before. A very small sound. It was the sound of something that was not sure what was happening. Beluth turned the dispersal unit up to 95%. Petra sneezed again, twice. Then she reached into the chest pocket of her layered garment, produced a small square of paper material, and wiped her nose. "Sorry," she said pleasantly. "Sinus thing. The damp air gets me every time." I want to be absolutely clear for the record that I kept my composure. I did. I straightened to full height, which in our standard armor configuration is approximately 11 feet of unambiguous biological threat, and I delivered the traditional Dominion First Contact Declaration. The one that has been translated into 47 languages and produced in 47 different species, the same fundamental result: immediate submission. "You smell like fear, little creature," I said. "You are correct to feel it." She looked at me, tilted her head to the left, tilted it back. Then she said, "Honestly, I think what I smelled was more of like a wet canvas smell? Kind of musty. Are those suits pressure regulated? Or is that a natural thing you're putting out?" I did not answer, partly because the question made no tactical sense, partly because, for the first time in 47 catalogings, I genuinely did not know what to do next. She took a sip from her metal cylinder. "How long did it take you to get here?" she asked, conversationally, like we were at some kind of social gathering. Because I did some math once on the nearest star systems, and even at, like, half the speed of light, you're looking at years, unless you've got something better than that, which, okay, clearly you do since you're here, but still. That's a long trip. Do you eat on the way? I'm assuming you eat. Are you more of a meat situation, or photosynthesizers? You've got some interesting coloring, I wasn't sure. Scorn took a step backward. I noticed. I chose not to address it. "We are not here to answer your questions," I said, because I had to say something, because the alternative was standing in a forest being interviewed by a human woman who had just sneezed at my biological terror weapon. "Oh, sure," she said, nodding like I had made a perfectly reasonable point. "No, that's fair. I'm just curious. Occupational habit." She swung her backpack slightly off one shoulder and started unzipping a compartment. "Do you mind if I need to collect a few more of these before I lose the light." She pulled out a small handled basket, already half full of dark, thick-capped fungi she had apparently been gathering from the forest floor. Scorn made the small sound again. Let me tell you something about Scorn. Scorn had been hunting since he was 15. He had, personally, subdued creatures of 7 different species with his bare limbs. He had once held a position on the Calorian front line for 19 straight hours while under active assault. His file used the word relentless as a compliment 4 times. Scorn was afraid of this woman. I know this because later, in debrief, when I asked him directly what he had been thinking during those first minutes, he said, "She was not behaving correctly. When something does not behave correctly, it is because it knows something you do not. And if it knows something you do not, then you are already behind." When I pressed him on exactly what he thought she knew, he said, "That is the problem. I did not know," which, in retrospect, was the most intelligent thing anyone said that entire evening, including me. Back in the forest, Petra had moved about 3 meters to her left and was crouching beside a fallen tree examining the fungal growth along its base with the focused attention of someone who had completely forgotten there were 3 alien hunters standing in the clearing behind her. "Your exoskeleton," she said, not looking up. "Is that a natural thing, or is that armor?" "Armor," said Beluth. I looked at him sharply. He looked back at me with an expression that said, very clearly, "I do not know why I said that." "Interesting," Petra said, pulling one of the fungi loose and turning it over to examine the underside. "Because the texture has a really beautiful quality to it. Like, do you know what geoduck clam looks like?" "No, obviously you don't. That's a local thing." She stood up, added the fungus to her basket. "What I mean is, there's a kind of ridged, layered quality to it that I bet would render down beautifully in a long braise. The collagen structure, or whatever you've got in there, looks like it could produce a really extraordinary stock." There was a silence. "You are," I said carefully, "describing cooking us." She looked genuinely startled. Then she said, "Oh, no, I meant the armor, the outer layer, the material." She paused. "Although, I don't know what's underneath, so I wouldn't rule anything out at this stage." She said this with the perfectly cheerful tone of someone commenting on the weather. On the ship, Foss Ulan, our biologist, later told me that at this point he had begun taking notes. Not threat assessment notes, personal notes. For my own records, he said. He also said he had needed a moment to go sit down, which, coming from Foss Ulan, meant something. I made the call at 17 minutes past landing. Scorn was still frozen. Beluth had physically repositioned himself so that Scorn was between him and Petra, which was not tactically sound and which I was going to address in the debrief until I realized that during the debrief I would have far larger issues to address. I called Commander Dravseth. I want to state for the record that I did not frame this as a request for help. I framed it as a request for additional strategic resources. There is a difference. The difference is important to me. Dravseth arrived 22 minutes later. He did not come alone. He brought 6 hunters. Full tactical configuration, sonic disruptors active, bio-shielding at maximum. He also brought his personal atmospheric projector, which generates a visual field of approximately 40 meters of crackling electromagnetic distortion, essentially turning the air around him into a visible, crackling, deeply unpleasant special effect. Dravseth was 12 feet tall even without armor. With armor, he was closer to 14. His bioluminescent threat display, which he activated on landing, as was his custom, lit the entire clearing in pulsing red gold, a color sequence that in Dominion biological psychology was wired directly to the fight-or-flight response and which, in testing, had caused subjects to report feeling that they were about to die, even when they were objectively sitting comfortably in a lab. He had, as the briefing files stated, caused an entire moon to surrender by standing near it. This was not a metaphor. There was a moon. It surrendered. There were documents. Petra looked up from her basket. She counted, out loud, moving her eyes from hunter to hunter with the calm, methodical precision of someone doing a head count at a dinner party. 1, 2, 3. Oh, there's one behind that tree. 4, 5, 6, 7, and the big one makes 8, plus the original 3, 11 total. She looked at Dravseth. Dravseth activated the full electromagnetic display. Petra took out her phone. She pointed it at him. There was a small clicking sound. "My food blog," she said, studying the screen with satisfaction, "is going to absolutely love this." Dravseth turned to look at me. I had no idea what a food blog was at that point. I have since been briefed. I am still not entirely sure it helped. "This is the creature," said Dravseth. It was not a question. It was the tone of a being who had expected something and received something completely different, and was still processing the gap. "This is her." "Yes," I said. "She does not appear alarmed." "She is not." He looked at her again. She was reviewing the photograph on her phone with her head tilted, apparently deciding whether to take another from a different angle. She looked up, noticed him looking, and helpfully turned the phone so he could see the image. "Good lighting out here, actually," she said. "The bioluminescence really helps." Dravseth had been in active service for 230 years. I have worked under him for 60 of those years. I have seen him respond to 17 different first contact scenarios, 4 military engagements, 2 attempted coups, and 1 incident involving a misclassified apex predator that had somehow gotten into the lower deck. In all of that time, in all of those situations, I had never seen the expression that was currently on his face. It was not rage, it was not calculation. It was something closer to what, in human terms, I would later learn to call being thrown off. He activated the formal Dominion Conquest Protocol. Full translation matrix, atmospheric broadcast, the complete legal and biological announcement that the Dominion had laid claim to the planet and its resources, and that resistance was both noted and irrelevant. It was, all told, about 4 minutes of language. Petra listened. She had sat down on a fallen log at some point, her basket beside her, both hands wrapped around her metal cylinder. She listened the way you listen to someone giving directions to a place you are not sure you want to go. When Dravseth finished, there was a significant silence. Then Petra said, "Okay, so I have a few questions, but first, are you the decision maker here, or is there someone above you I should be talking to? Because I've found, in negotiations, it saves time to just go straight to whoever actually has authority." Dravseth said, "I am Commander Dravseth. I have authority over this entire fleet." "Great," she said, in the tone of someone who has been put through 3 levels of customer service and has finally reached the right department. "So, here is my position. I have a catering event on Saturday, 42 guests, 4-course menu. 2 of them have dietary restrictions I've been working around for a month. I am not going to be abducted, detained, or otherwise inconvenienced before Saturday. That's a hard line for me." She took a sip of coffee. "After Saturday, I am genuinely open to a conversation. I find your biology fascinating. I have a lot of questions about your nutritional requirements, and honestly, the fact that you've achieved faster-than-light travel means you've probably solved some protein synthesis problems that I would love to hear about. But that's Tuesday. Tuesday after 2 I can do. Does that work?" 11 alien hunters, the most feared commander in the Dominion 7th Fleet, and I stood in a forest on Earth in complete silence. Scorn, later, in the debrief, said that this was the moment he understood we had made a mistake. Not a tactical mistake, a categorical one. He said, "We scanned for weapons, we scanned for armor, we scanned for biological threat indicators. We did not scan for whatever that is." And when I asked him to define whatever that is, he said, "A creature that has already decided the outcome and is simply waiting for you to catch up." I think about that a lot. She stood up, not because we threatened her, not because we gave her permission. She stood up because she had finished her coffee and had, apparently, finished collecting her mushrooms and was therefore finished with the clearing. She swung her backpack onto her shoulders, picked up her basket, and looked at all of us one more time with an expression of genuine, uncomplicated warmth. "You know," she said, and her voice was quieter now, not softer exactly, but steadier, the way a river sounds when it stops rushing over rocks and finds deep water. "My grandmother used to say something. She used to say, the louder something growls, the more it wants you to think it isn't afraid." Nobody moved. She looked at the fleet hovering visibly above the tree line, all that metal and light and implied violence hanging in the cold night air, and then she looked back at us, and she nodded, as though we had confirmed something she had suspected. Then she turned and walked back up the path, unhurried, not running, just walking. Her boots quiet on the forest floor, her basket swinging slightly at her side. And every single one of us, 11 hunters, 1 commander, all of the Dominion 7th Fleet's finest, stood and watched her go. Nobody moved. Beluth made a sound, a very specific sound. It took me a moment to process it. It was crying. Beluth, who had survived 3 military engagements and a collapsed cave system on Merath IV, was crying. I did not address it. I am not sure what I would have said. Scorn was already writing something on his personal data pad. I found out later it was a letter to his family. Not because he expected to die, but because, he said, it felt appropriate to say something to someone. We stood there until she was completely gone, until the sound of her boots had faded and the forest had gone back to its insects and its quiet, And then Dravseth turned to look at me, and I want to say that what I saw in his expression was anger, or contempt, or the cold military calculation of a being already planning a different approach. What I actually saw was a commander who needed a moment. He took it. Then he said, very quietly, "We are going back to the ship." We went back to the ship. The mission report took me 9 hours to write. This is significant because my previous longest report was 3 hours, following an incident on the Valorian border that involved a diplomatic misunderstanding, 2 destroyed cargo vessels, and a formal complaint from 4 different governments. That took 3 hours. This took 9. The central problem was vocabulary. The Dominion mission report template is built on a specific architecture of language: contact, response, outcome. Every field assumes a linear progression. We arrived, we presented dominance, the target responded in one of the cataloged ways. There are 47 cataloged response types. I have used 31 of them across my career. They cover everything from violent resistance to immediate surrender to one memorable situation on Drath 7, where the native population simply refused to acknowledge we had arrived and continued their daily routines until we left, which I had filed under Response Type 22, Passive Disengagement. Petra Okafor fit none of them. I tried Response Type 6, Verbal Resistance with Misdirection, but that implied she was trying to confuse us tactically, and she was not. She was just talking normally. I tried Response Type 31, Anomalous Calm, but that was for creatures that failed to register threat due to neurological atypicality, and there was nothing atypical about her. She registered the threat perfectly well. She simply weighed it against her Saturday catering event and found it wanting. In the end, I created a new field. Response Type 48. Subject acknowledged contact, assessed threat, expressed culinary interest in hunter's physical composition, conducted informal negotiation, and departed on own initiative. No fear response recorded. No aggression recorded. Fear dispersal unit ineffective. Electromagnetic display. Photograph. The word lunch appeared 6 times in the report. I counted afterward. I could not seem to stop referencing it. Every time I tried to describe the initial contact, it kept surfacing. "You smell like lunch." She said it so easily, so immediately, with the casual confidence of someone who had looked at us and made a quick categorization and moved on, the same way you might glance at clouds and decide whether to bring a coat. She had looked at 3 apex predators from a spacefaring civilization and thought, food, not in fear, not as a defense mechanism, as an observation. I submitted the report at 0400 hours, ship time. High Command responded at 0422. The response was 4 words: "Please clarify response type." I sent back the full field notes, the audio recording, the video capture, the biological readings from the fear dispersal unit showing, in clear and reproducible data, that the unit had functioned at full capacity and had produced exactly 0 measurable cortisol response in the target. I sent Foss Yuland's notes, which by that point filled 11 pages and had begun including detailed sketches of the mushroom basket and what Foss Yuland described as the remarkable economy of her threat assessment process. I sent Scorn's debrief. I sent Beluth's, though I edited out the part where he cried because I felt that was, professionally, not useful. High Command was quiet for 6 hours. Then they sent a single updated classification. Earth, Sector 7, 3rd planet. Category Omega, mandatory fleet-wide advisory. Do not engage. Do not approach. Do not initiate contact of any kind. Classification rationale. Species exhibits non-standard threat response patterns inconsistent with known biological or behavioral models. Predator-prey dynamic, unclear. Risk assessment, insufficient data for confidence rating. Recommended course, indefinite avoidance. At the bottom of the classification file, someone, I do not know who, because it was filed anonymously, which was itself unprecedented, had added a single line in the notes field. One individual. Forest. Night. Alone. Mushroom basket. We came with 11. She left with the mushrooms. I am writing this final section in my personal log, not in the official record, because the official record has already been submitted and reviewed and is now apparently required reading for every first contact training program in the 7th Fleet, which is something I am choosing not to think about. I have been doing this for 400 years. 400 years of standing on the edge of new worlds and watching them recognize what we are. There is a specific moment in first contact that I have come to rely on, the way you rely on gravity, the way you rely on the accuracy of your instruments. It is the moment of recognition, the moment when the creature across from you understands the gap between you, understands that the hierarchy is real and fixed and not subject to renegotiation, and adjusts accordingly. In 400 years, that moment has never failed to arrive. It did not arrive in a forest in Earth's northern continent on a damp Tuesday night. What arrived instead was a woman with mushrooms and coffee and a Saturday commitment, who looked at 11 armed members of a civilization that has been conquering worlds since before her planet had writing, and who categorized us as a possible soup ingredient and a Tuesday appointment. I have reviewed the recording of her leaving 43 times. I am not entirely sure why. I think I am looking for the moment when she was afraid. The moment when the walk gets a little faster, or the shoulders tighten, or the breathing changes. The moment when the composure slips, and you see the thing underneath that she was covering. It is not there. She walks exactly as she arrived. Same pace, same posture. The basket swings at the same rhythm. About 20 meters up the path, just before the first bend, she starts whistling again. I ran the audio through our cultural music database. It took a while because the database's Earth section was, at that point, quite limited. But it found a match. The song is called What a Wonderful World. It is about how beautiful everything is. I sat with that for a long time. Here is what I have concluded. After 43 viewings and 9 hours of reporting and 6 hours of high command silence and a fleet-wide Category Omega designation and one biologist's 11 pages of personal notes, we went to Earth looking for prey. We brought fear as a weapon. We brought size and light and the full accumulated threat of 6,000 years of dominion over other species. And somewhere in a dark forest on a damp Tuesday night, a woman with a sinus condition looked at all of that, thought lunch, sneezed, and went back to collecting mushrooms. She knew what we were. She understood what we represented. She was not stupid, and she was not broken, and she was not chemically incapable of fear. She just decided. She decided how the situation was going to go, and then she went and did that, and we all stood in the forest and watched, because not one of us, in all our centuries of training and conquest and biological engineering, had been prepared for a creature that simply chose not to be afraid of us. My grandmother, said Petra Okafor, used to say that the louder something growls, the more it wants you to think it isn't afraid. I have been growling for 400 years. I requested a transfer to a different galaxy sector 3 days after filing the report. The request was denied. Earth stays on my route. Every third sweep of this quadrant brings me back through Sector 7. Back past the blue planet with its arguing populations and its cooking competitions and its forests full of women collecting mushrooms at night. I looked at the route map for a long time. Then I closed it. Then I sat in the dark of my cabin at 0200 hours and thought about a Tuesday appointment I was apparently keeping for the rest of my career. She said Tuesday after 2. I do not know if she was serious. I am, increasingly, not willing to find out.